So it will be more pleasant. So you will wish to stay here more and more. So as Gustavo mentioned, we will be here till 9 o'clock, which is okay. Everything what you didn't ask will be possible to ask now. But before that, we have a pleasure that today with us is Professor Anna Gorczynska from University of Łódź, and she will start this session. We are speaking just for vegetarians about transparency, how to get the best possible meal with the meat. Please.
Sorry. Thank you very much. My name is Anna Gorczynska, and I represent the central part of Europe. The University of Łódź, which is in the middle of Poland, and the Center for Public Procurement and PPP, which was established in Łódź on the Faculty of Law as the only one public center for promotion of just teaching and research in the wide field of public procurement and public-private partnership. So our main aims are teaching the students, teaching postgraduate students. We are teaching the students in Polish, but we have got also some extra classes in English on public procurement law, on European economic law. So we are very happy that, for example, Erasmus students or students from other countries all over the world come to us for a stage for the collaboration. And we also just conduct the international projects from Horizon 2020, from just other programs, just to increase the knowledge about public procurement, not only among contracting authorities, but also among entrepreneurs, and also we address our offer to control bodies, because it's also important to teach the audit authorities how to control public procurement in a proper way. Please remember that Poland is just let's say, new member state, not very new, but we are in the European Union since 15 years. We entered the structures of the European Union in 2004. So from one hand, we have got 15 years of experience of just being and of the harmonization of our legal system with the European Union legal rules. But on another hand, we are also just trying just to follow the moving point, which is the acquis communautaire of European Union. So my presentation will be divided into two parts. I wouldn't like just to make you bored, but I have to touch the legal issues which refer to the most economically advantageous offer. But also I would like just to show you my experience from my second post of work, namely from the Fund of the Protection of Environment and Water Resources, where we also try to implement most economically advantageous offer, especially in the reference of the promotion of the protection of environment. So everybody knows that public procurement has a dual character because it's regulated on the European Union level and under the threshold regulation on the national domestic level have to be applied. In Poland, the national public procurement law refers to the contract about particular threshold. This is the threshold on the level of 30,000 euros. But there is always a question mark, what would happen with the contracts under, yes? And we have always taken into consideration that all European Union countries are members of WTO, so government procurement agreement has to be also taken under consideration. The domestic legal system is also very interesting because very often contracting authorities forget that public procurement rules refer not only to the contracts above the threshold, not only to the procedures above the threshold, but also to the domestic public procurement rules, not only those which are regulated by the Domestic Act on Public Procurement, but also of the lower value. Why? Because it is a part of public finance, and it is the responsibility of the contracting authority for the public spendings. So the basic rules of public procurement are the same as the basic rules which govern the internal market of the European Union. I listed some of them. I will not be able just to go very deeply into the details, but the rule of non-discrimination, competitiveness, and transparency are just the core center of the internal market, and they have to be implemented by the contracting authorities on all stages of the procedure. The same refers to the internal market basic principles of the common market, namely free movement of goods, freedom to provide services, freedom of entrepreneurship, or free movement of persons. Of course, we can add also free movement of capital. How it works in practice. We all know that we should implement those rules on all stages of the procedures, beginning from planning of public procurement, which is very important. It was already mentioned in this room that planning of the public procurement, also long-term planning, is very important because the contracting authority has to be aware what they want to buy, how much money they have, how much money they should apply when it is possible from just external resources, from, for example, in some countries, structure funds, from other institutions which are managing the funding. Then it is very important to consult with the market, the offer of the market, because according to my practice, I see that sometimes the contracting authorities do not respect the activity and the offer of the market. But we have got, looking from the legal point of view, quite easy tool, which is market dialogue, in other words, the market consultation. It is possible to talk in a transparent way with the providers of varied offers to check in advance, before we will start the procedure itself, to check the offer of the market. It could inform the contracting authority about, for example, innovative approach of the just providers of particular services. It could also just stop some dreamers in the contracting authority from just restriction of the access for the providers to the public procurement procedure, because the market could be not mature enough to provide the offers according to the wishes of public administration. So the transparency is very important to be present also in that stage, and the information about the competitive dialogue should be published later in the all documents within the all stages of the procedure. So in some countries, and I belong to the Central European post-socialistic countries, we observed sometimes the fear of the consulting with just the private sector, which could be just treated as an illegal form of the collaboration with the private sector. And for that fears, I have the answer that you can do that, but in a transparent way. You should inform everybody that you are starting the dialogue, the market dialogue, and you simply check with just taking under consideration also protection of data and sometimes the secrets which are just hidden by some entrepreneurs due to the intellectual property rules, but showing the offer of the market. Then the transparency and non-discrimination and competitiveness is very important on just the stage of the description of the subject of the contract. So the description of the essential terms of the contract, where the contracting authority has to decide what they want to buy. And it's a challenge. I know the praxis very well because I was always working on the university as a university professor and in self-governmental administration on the level of region. And I observed how difficult it is for even public procurement specialists within even big institution to describe the complicated subject of the contract. They should collaborate with experts, but sometimes there is a time pressure, so they do not have got enough time. They should collaborate with other experts, with the economists, with the engineers, with those who have particular merit to describe the subject of the contract in a proper and transparent way. But to achieve that goal, they have to just start a lifelong learning process and also just to be aware of the possibility of discrimination, the possibility of just introduction to the description of the subject of the contract, some measures which could be discriminatory or which could just have a negative impact on the competition of the market. For example, labels, yes, environmental labels or social labels. They are, of course, allowed, yes. But sometimes, and we have got the case law, when, for example, in the vendor machines, public procurement contract, the scope of labels was reduced only to the one type of label, which was not very often. In fact, there was only one product which fulfilled the requirement of that labels. So it means that contracting authority has to be aware that by the description of the subject of the contract, they cannot decrease the competition, or they should always allow the equivalent products, but not only by just calling the products equivalent, but just by the real praxis. We are also aware that in 2014 directives, which came into force in 2016, there were some aspects introduced to the public procurement procedure. Especially the aim of that reform was simplification of the procedures and reduction of administrative burden. But there were also just some new aspects of just economy of law philosophy, namely life cycle costing philosophy, which was expressly just introduced to the legal rules, and some aspects were stressed on a wider just scope than it was before in 2004 directives, like electronic procurement, like sustainable and social procurement, also green procurement aspects and support for small and medium sizes enterprises. And just now all member states of the European Union, earlier or later, better or in more general way, are trying to introduce those aspects into their domestic legal system. In 2004 directives, we already had most economically advantageous offer, which was referring to the subject of the contract. I think that most of you remember Gorczynska's famous case from '99. But the decision on just taking them into account was the subjective discretion of the contracting authority. Even those criteria should be precise and measurable. Also, just the use of weighting and scoring system was also just present in the reference to the non-discrimination, equality, and transparency rules. We also had the second possibility, which was the lowest price criterion, and price as only one decision-making factor. From my Polish perspective, I can tell you that the lowest price criterion is dangerous. Yes, of course, there are sometimes the situation when you can describe the essential terms of the contract in such a good way, or it refers to the day-to-day products with just particular quality, that sometimes that price is the most important decision-making factor. But the praxis and the main tendency of just taking the lowest price as only one decision-making factor was dangerous in that sense that the quality of the offer was usually quite low. And it was leading to the fraudulent agreements between bidders. So collusion was very popular because when the price was the only factor which was just deciding, sometimes we observed in Poland, for example, in the construction sector, the price wars between the providers, and sometimes even just with the some entrepreneurs who were just applying according to WTO and GPA rules to our Polish contracts. We also saw the situation when those price wars were leading to abnormally low bid, and sometimes contracting authority didn't manage it. As a result, just the lowest price offer was selected, and there was a collapse in the execution of the contract. Because, for example, they were not able with that financing to conduct the construction of the road. Because they were not able to hire the subcontractors and subcontractors who would fulfill the right tasks in the construction process. I mentioned low quality of public works, services and supplies, which was really a nightmare for many units of the public administration. But partly it was also connected with the mistakes made before on the level of contracting authority, when they didn't precisely describe the essential terms of the contracts. Example, steps in our Philharmonic Hall, when the sort of wood was not presented, at least in that way that it should be the sort of wood which refers to the steps. Yes, as a result, it was very low quality wood used for that purpose, and long-term process which ended after many years. And of course, the public administration won that case, but it cost a lot of money, it cost a lot of time, and there was a problem for the users, just how to use the steps which are just being destroyed for relatively high price. So it wasn't just as a result just leading to the money saving, but the conclusion was that it was just very often the situation created very often the situation that the public administration had to order particular works or services or supplies twice because of low quality. And we are not rich enough to spend money, and nobody is rich enough just to repeat just the investment many times. I also mentioned the problem with employment in the new directives from 2014. We have got the direct stressing of the social aspect, which was already mentioned, just the social aspects in the global perspective. But that abuse of labor code rules was also very often present because of just other than labor law contract rules of the employment of the employees also just was decreasing the price, but from the social aspect it was also decreasing just the salaries of the workers. So it wasn't just that idea. So let's have a just look how the legal background looks like just now. And it is regulated in Article 67 of the actual directive. Here is just classical directive. We have got also just utilities directive, but here just I mentioned that one. And you can see that the offer should be based on the most economically advantageous tender, which is in fact the title of our panel today. That most economically advantageous tender shall be identified of the basis of the price or cost, but using cost effectiveness approach, such life costing, which is further explained in Article 68, and including best price quality ratio. So it is directly just referring to the relation between price and quality. It should be assessed on the basis of criteria which are enumerated. So it's not closed list, but there are some criteria which are enumerated, like qualitative criteria, environmental criteria, social aspects. But all of them are still, and have to be still, linked to the subject matter of the contract. Those criteria may comprise quality, including technical merit, aesthetic and functional characteristic, accessibility, design for all users, social, environmental, innovative characteristic, trading conditions, organization, qualification, experience of the staff, performing of the contract, or after-sales service, technical assistant, delivery conditions, for example, delivery date, which is very popular, delivery process, or just period of completion. These are only just examples, what the contracting authority could take under consideration. So, in fact, for somebody who is employed in public administration and who asks, what else? Price and what else? Here is ready-to-go answer. Of course, the problem is how to describe it. Yes, because delivery date is relatively easy, but quality, you have to give the definition. In the reference to the experience of the staff, the technical merit of the staff, you also have to describe how you understand it, yes? Just to assure transparency, just to assure competitiveness, just to assure equal treatment. As you can see in the wording of Article 67, that cost element may take form of the fixed price or cost of basis on which economic operator will complete on quality criteria only, and the member states may provide that contracting authority may not use price-only criterion, but also just the other award criteria. So it is still possible, just because somebody is sometimes just writing in the literature that it is not possible anymore just to apply just the lowest price criteria. It depends, yes? It should be taken under consideration as a very important factor, but just I'm sharing the opinion that it could remain, but it should be understood in that context of most economically advantageous offer. As you can see, and it stressed once again, that award criteria should be considered to be linked to the subject matter of the public contract. And it should be related to any stage of their life cycle, including the factors which are referring to the specific process of production, to the specific process of another stage of their life cycle. We have to understand the award criteria properly in that sense that they shall not have effect on conferring to unrestricted freedom of choice of the contracting authority. So, once again, what was mentioned before, the public administration, the contracting authority, shall assure the possibility of effective competition on all stages, and the contracting authorities shall specify in the procurement documents the relative weighting which is given to each criteria which are choosing the best offer. And in the transparent way, those criteria has to be presented in all documents which refer to the public procurement procedure. So just to sum up, we have got just the catalog, which is besides the price, taking under consideration those extra aspects. In Poland, delivery day, it's the most popular, but also running costs, also just after sales service, it is dominating, but still analyzing just the documents price is a very important decision-making factors, and we'll hear in the next presentation how it can be manipulated. Yes? So just the most economically advantageous offer, it's not solution for all problems, because still, unfortunately, the contracting authority can manipulate with scoring, can manipulate with weighting. The second interesting aspect of the legal approach in the 2014 directive, it's life cycle costing, which should refer to the all stages of the life of the product, and which refer to the costs relating to acquisition, to the costs of use and consumption, for example, of energy and other resources. Then maintenance costs and of life costs, like collection and recycling costs. So it's a very wide approach from the birth until to the end of life of each product, which we already know from economics. It also stressed, what is quite interesting for me in my researches on green public procurement, the importance of the environmental externalities linked to the product, which can be included to the evaluation of the product, like, for example, cost of emission of greenhouse gases, cost of the other pollutions, costs of climate change mitigation. And it should be, of course, indicated in all documents how those costs are created. They should be based on non-discriminatory criteria and, should be available on the equal terms to all parties. And it's quite interesting. There's also just an open gate for the European Union Legislative Act to regulate a particular methodology on life cycle costing in a common way on the level of the European Union. But the problem is maybe not the total lack and absence of that methodology, because I will just mention some examples later on, but the problems with just creation of that methodology of life cycle costing. There are some researches, maybe not very well developed in Poland, but they already exist, which just show that, for example, life cycle costing for many products, and even there were some data that they are just for average products, so the acquisition costs are relatively low. But the maintenance costs are higher on the level of 10%, and energy costs, especially for the building, could be even on the level of 85% of just to some equipment for public administration. The reference to the methodology, which is adopted on the EU level, we have got, for example, the ready-to-go regulation regulation and directive on green and energy-efficient road transport vehicles, which give us the methodology of life cycle costing for public transport, and it should be implemented for the new acquisition of the cars for the public administration. Cost efficiency has got varied definition. It could refer to the quality cost ratio, to the substantial aspects, objective aspects. It depends what we understand under that wording. But it is very useful for the description of the life cycle costs. Talking about life cycle costing, we have to select First of all, the method of the cost calculation. Secondly, we have to list the costs of life cycle. Then the contracting authority has to decide which costs should be taken under consideration. Then they should introduce the time reference for life cycle costing, and then they should take under consideration in particular time period, for example, inflation rate. So it's very, very fast, just presentation of the way of thinking, just taking under consideration the life cycle. And here I gave you just the easiest example. It's just the typical just evaluation of life cycle, which is not good for the complicated contracts, but it would be good when at least contracting authority could think it over. I'm sure that many of the contracting authorities are thinking about it already, but maybe not calling that as life cycle costing. Let's have a look. In that approach, we understand life cycle costing as cost of acquisition plus time of exploitation or utilization, and then we take under consideration energy cost per year. So easy example with the costs just in Polish zloty of the acquisition of printing machine. So it's cost of acquisition, time of exploitation, energy, which is used average by the printing machine, and the energy costs. It shows us how much the particular product would cost us. Quality. We have got the problems in definition. It always should refer to the subject matter of the contract, and it cannot be based on any discrimination for any actors on the market, what is a challenge for public administration. Could refer that quality to the experience of the bidders, for example, in the legal services, or just in the intellectual property, other services. It is very important to take the experience of the provider of the services under consideration. But it could also refer to the energy efficiency, service costs, or environmental friendly aspects. And that environmental friendly aspects in public procurement, which I would like to stress in my last part of the presentation, would refer to all stages of the public procurement which allow, just now not obligatory in just general approach of the European Union law, but sometimes obligatory in some member states, but which stress the role of environmental approach on the all stages of the procedure, also in the most economically advantageous offer. And it could mean, for example, energy efficiency, pollution, waste, or recycling. Could I have the second presentation, just very, very fast, in 3 minutes, please?
Yes, of course.
Because I will show you some lively example, because it was just a rapid overview of the legal background, but how it works in Poland in the institution which I represent just in my second post, because I'm Vice President of Regional Fund of Environmental Protection and Water Management in Łódź. We have got 16 such institutions, they are financial institutions which are supporting the protection of environment. And we are trying to support the right investment in the wide field of the protection of environment. Namely, in the following just areas: adaptation to climate change, air protection, water protection, waste management, and biological diversity. The scope of the financial support for the protection of environment is possible for varied actors on the market, for self-government, for governmental entities, for entrepreneurs, for cultural institutions, because in Poland it depends. Some of them are owned by self-government, some of them are just owned by or managed by governmental entities, universities, and just science institutions are important partner for us, as well NGOs and private persons. The scope of support refer waste management, air protection, water resources protection, nature and landscape protection, scientific research and monitoring and expertise, and also eco-education. So we try to teach our partners, our beneficiary, but first of all, we are offering them low-rate credits, subsidies. We also directly transfer the public money to the governmental administration entities. And we have got also just special credits and subsidies program. And credits are very preferential because you can see very low rate of interest. We finance up to the 100% of eligible costs. The credits are long-term because they are just for 15 years. And the cancellation is possible up to 45%, 15% because they would fulfill all just provisions of the contract, but 30% we give the cancellation of the credit for the green aspects and for the next investment in the field of the protection of environment, which is just the additional just advantage for the new investment, for the development of the new ideas of especially government and self-government. Subsidies refer mainly to the education, monitoring and landscape protection plan and research issues, but there are also some subsidies which try to promote, for example, renewable sources of energy, especially investment in renewable energy sources and cogeneration systems in the public and private buildings, because it's a challenge for all of us. It's also the challenge of Poland, how to develop for example, photovoltaic plants, how to develop varied investment in the wide field of just the alternative sources of energy. And here you have got on the last slide the contact details to me and the passive building, which is the seat of the Fund for the Protection of Environment. So even the green public procurement is not obligatory in Poland. We are trying by the special financial institutions which are just investing the wide scope of the green investment, of just the environmental investment, we are trying to give extra points. We are trying to encourage our contracting authority. They should just implement the environmental criteria into the public procurement procedure, because we are not responsible for their public procurement. But in our rules, just to get the credit, to get the subsidy, we give extra points for the protection of environment. And we teach, teach, and teach. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing with us your experience from theory and practice. And I agree completely with you related to lowest price. We had EBRD supported project in Serbia. 95% of criteria was exactly the lowest price, and the results were, of course, disaster. So that is one thing. Another thing, you are asking for explanation, for more explanation of certain public procurement criteria, which is good, but then you need more creative, more skilled public procurement officers, which is very important, and we should move in that direction. And of course, as you mentioned, it should be connected with the subject of the public procurement. Thank you. We will have opportunity for many questions. Now, I will ask Professor Jan Telgen from University of Twente and University of Utrecht.
I would like to walk around a little bit. Can I have that? Okay. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Jan Telgen. I'm a retired professor. I retired last year after being a professor of applied mathematics, and those of you who are afraid can leave the room now, and public procurement. I was a chaired professor for public procurement for 32 years, and on top of that I was a partner in PricewaterhouseCoopers and one of their predecessors running the public procurement consultancy. So I talk both from my academic and from my practical experience. The slides are now on PPRC logo. You see it up upper right corner. PPRC is the Public Procurement Research Center, which is a social enterprise. We employ 5 people, and our main goal is to bring them to a PhD. We pay them a salary. I'm the non-paid executive director. I get my old age pension, etc. But I have to pay those people a decent salary, and that's why we have to do some paid research. So usually for the government or the National Police Office or organizations like that. And it's managed by the University of Utrecht and University of Twente. But first of all, we're in public procurement and we do it for a purpose. And my purpose is this. This is May this year. These are my 13 grandchildren. The middle one, of course, is my wife. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I only have 3 children, by the way. Yeah? So it's not my fault. What are we talking about? We're talking about the award phase of a tender. And I will go over a few items, and it may seem a little bit of nitty-gritty detail, but actually this is the work that public procurement people have to do. So I'll bring you up to speed in a few slides. First of all, what is the setting? We're talking about the award phase of a tender. So everything, preparation, specifications, everything like that has been done. Now we're talking about the award phase. And how does that normally go? Well, we have meet. That's the subject of this session. And we're talking about the best price-quality ratio. Yeah, that's what is defined in the European directive. But don't be afraid. Just the second part is a little bit about the European directives as a court of justice, but all the rest is independent of the European directives. So we're talking about best price-quality ratio. We award both on price and on quality. How is that normally done? Normally, you have to mention the blue part. You say price, quality, and delivery time are my award criteria, and I have weights to each of these award criteria. Then you get bids in, A, B, C, D, and they're in euros or dollars or whatever, and they're in weeks. So you have to convert them to a common denominator, and that's what we call scores. And this process is called scoring, and then you find who is the best bid, and ultimately the one with the most points is the best bid. We'll be talking about this scoring quite a lot. And I'll give you one example. And there's 3 lessons in this example. And the lessons are in order of importance. So the least important I start with. Here's the example. EU directives require that, but everybody does that. Same thing for the UN procurement manual, EBRD, etc. You have to publish your award criteria and you have to publish the weights. Anna just mentioned these facts. Very transparent. So let's do exactly that. Here we are, we're buying new vehicles. And we think price is much more important than delivery time. So we attach a weight of 80% to price. So price is 4 times as important as delivery time. Now, here's a question for you. We get in 2 bids. And just look at these bids, and who do you think will win? Who thinks bid 1 will win? No hands. Who think bid 2 will win? Well, lots of people don't know, but the majority of those who voted went for bid 2. Well, I can congratulate those people. They are averagely intelligent. This is a normal reaction. What people do is say, hey, the difference in price is about 1/3. And the difference in delivery time is also about 1/3. No one is best in everything, but since price is 4 times more as important than delivery time, it's easy, price will win. Not even. The real answer is you cannot know. In order to know, you have to know how to score. And this is a very normal scoring rule. What is the best price you can get? Well, 0. You get the vehicles for free. What's the best delivery time? Immediately. And you subtract the number of points for every time, every week. Run out of battery. Okay. You subtract a few points for every week that it takes longer, and every 1,000 euros that it takes is more expensive, $1,000. Now, if you do that, this is quite normal, nothing strange, both are linear, etc. If you do that, then you can do the calculation, and you see $18,000 here, subtract 18 points from the 80 we have, that's 62, 13,067 points. 10 weeks subtracted from the 20, we get 10, here we get 4, and we add these and the total points, and you see bid 1, for which nobody raised their hands, wins. Bid 1 wins. How is that possible? Well, it's pretty easy because I added this. If I would have added something else, like this, and mind you, the only change I put in is 20,000 instead of 80,000 here, so I subtract 4 points for every 1,000 euros it's more expensive, then I would get this result, and bid 2 wins. Meaning the decision of the scoring rule determines who wins. This is the very first lesson, the least important one. If you want to commit fraud, corruption, and you're a buyer, and you want your favorite to win, don't publish this. Don't publish the scoring rule. Because then you can determine afterwards, and it's fine, and you make your favorite win. I have a paper, it's a rather mathematical paper. It's called How to Screw a Tender. It's a little bit strange title, but it basically means I can make everybody win when there's no convex dominance. That's a mathematical term as well, meaning that no bid is best on all aspects. So that's the first lesson. Now let's look at that in a picture. Here you see on the horizontal axis I have price. On the vertical axis I have the score, and you can make 80 points on price with a bid of $0. Now, if I have the blue line, which is the original scoring that we used, the difference between a bid of 13,000 and 18,000 or 16,000, whatever it was, is very small. But if we use the red line, which is the second one, the difference between these two is much bigger, which is enough to offset the difference in delivery time, which is 6 points. Yeah? Now the second lesson, and to many of you this may come as a surprise, and to many institutions this comes as a surprise, is, okay, we have said price is 4 times as important as delivery time. We maintain that. We give 80% of all our points to price. How can I make price completely unimportant while still giving 80% of the weight to price? How can I make price completely unimportant while still giving 80% of the weight to price? Well, I think you mean the right thing, but you use words that I prefer not to use, like reserve price. What you could do is, instead of the red line or the blue line, instead of 20,000 or 80,000, if this line starts at 80 points here and gets to 0 at 8 million. So it's almost horizontal. a very, very high price. So instead of the 20,000 we had here, put in 8 million or 80 million or 100 million. What does it mean? This one we had, that's the black line. What does it mean? It means that the difference in price score between these two bids is 0. So whatever quality score is better wins. So the second lesson, and I can extend a little bit on this, because I did this with 80 points. I can do this with 90 points. I can do this with 95 points. I can do this with 99 points. And still make quality the decisive factor. So weights are worthless, are useless, don't tell you anything at all. Forget about weights completely unless you also specify scoring rules. You need the scoring rules with the weights. Just the weights, as the terminology is in the European directive, as it is in the UN procurement manual. They even prescribe you should do 30% for this and 40% for that. Useless, bullshit. Forget about it, it's worthless, unless you specify the scoring mechanism. And I know in a lot of organizational procurement manuals, handbooks or whatever, there's issues about the weights. I've sit into many conversations in teams where they had to decide about the weights. And they were frantically fighting about either 60% or 70%. It's useless, leading to nowhere. This is the second lesson. And I promised they would be in increasing order of importance. The third lesson is, this is the second. The third lesson is going back to your original thing. Third lesson is, I did not put in bid 1 and bid 2 by accident. I did not put in supplier 1 and supplier 2. Suppose I'm Mitsubishi of Japan, somewhere in Yokohama or wherever they are located, and I can supply these vehicles exactly to specifications. Takes me 8 weeks to make them in my plant in Japan. And I still have to bring them here to Frascati. Yeah? I can put them on a ship, Strait of Malacca, Singapore, Suez, etc. Naples or Rome, I don't know where they unload these ships. Takes 6 weeks, or 5 or something like that. That's this offer. I can also put these cars in an airplane. Yeah? It's this offer. It's much faster, but it's very expensive. So the buyer gets exactly the same vehicles. I produce exactly the same vehicles. To me, the costs are completely the same, whether I have to pay for transport by sea or by airplane. What happens if I don't tell this to the suppliers? Then the suppliers have to take a gamble. They have to guess, what do these buyers want? Do they have a scoring mechanism with 80,000 in there? Or do they have a scoring mechanism with 20,000 in there? So it's a blind guess for the suppliers. What do these guys want? Because if they want this one, the 80,000, I should put in bid 1. Yeah? Airlift. If they want the 20,000, I should put in bid 2 by sea. To me, it doesn't matter. It's just a blind guess. Meaning that as a buyer, you might get not the best bid that a supplier can supply. So it's a stupidity by the buyer not to mention these scoring rules explicitly. Yeah? I've encountered many buyers that say, I'm afraid to do so. Not afraid, I hesitate to do so because I lose control over what's happening. Because then they can calculate which bid they should supply. They are afraid of that, and I say, hooray! Because that's exactly what I want. I want them to know which bid they should supply. That fits me best. And of course, then it makes it very important to determine these scoring rules or score graphs. So that's the third lesson. Bids 1 and bid 2 may be from the same supplier, and by not mentioning the scoring rules, you're depriving yourself of an opportunity to get a better bid. Okay, always mention or publish the scoring rule. Talking about transparency, it's not with so many words required in any system that I know of. Of course, we've got sushi di frutta in Europe, etc. That could be from which you could derive, you should do that, but it's not mentioned in a lot of organizations. And just brief step into the legal issue. There's a case called Di Marzo. This is the stupidest legal statement I've ever seen, because the European Court of Justice said you're not required to bring to the attention of potential tenderers the method of evaluation. You're not required to do so. Yeah? Again, the same thing. But in discussion number 2, up here, they say you're not required to do so only if it does not contain elements which, if they had been known in advance, they could have affected their preparation. So basically they're saying you should not mention it unless it affects them, and then you should mention it. And it always affects. That's what I just showed you. So this is just plain stupidity. This is my own non-legal wording of Di Marzo. Yep. I hope nobody from the European Court of Justice is present here. No? Okay, back to scoring. Scoring is a very important job for a purchaser, determining the score graphs. It's actually the main job of a purchaser, trying to get out of its organization whatever they feel is important and how important, etc. I'll skip the examples and I'll go into one scoring rule that's frequently used in a number of organizations. And in many organizations, for example in Belgium, it's mandatory by law. It was mandatory in the National Police Force in the Netherlands. It was mandatory in the central government in the Netherlands. There's many organizations that do so. It is outlawed in Portugal, just to mention this. This is a method frequently used, and it's in a lot of procurement manuals to do so. It says for price, but it's also applied for quality. It says the score you get, the number of points you get for price, is the maximum number of points times this ratio. And consider your price, price I, is the best price. Then this is 1, and you get maximum number of points. If your price is twice as high as the best price, then this is a half, and you get half of the maximum points. Right? Everybody? This is the level of mathematics I will discuss with you. Let's see what happens. Here we have 2 bidders, A and B, prices of 500 and 400, and it's easily calculated with this formula. You get scores of 80 and 100. Now, if we have 3 bidders for which A and B are the same, but now we add in a number C, which is very low price, and then you get different scores on price. So nothing happens. The only thing you can observe is that the price difference between A and B, the score difference, is 20 points in the top one and 10 points in the lower one. But now we're talking about meat. We're adding in quality. And if the quality scores are like the ones given on the screen, then you see, if we add that and we calculate the total score, then supplier B wins. He has most points when there are two bidders. If A and B do not change, and supplier C is added, then supplier A wins. Even though supplier C is added, which is completely irrelevant to the competition. He is last. He's not a winner. So adding in an irrelevant supplier may change who wins. And that's because of the scoring rule used. This is called relative scoring. It's relative to, in this case, the best bid. There's also relative scoring to other formulas, but let's use this simple one. In this relative scoring, this happens. And then the question, of course, is how do you recognize? Because you're either in the situation with two bidders or the situation with three bidders. And as long as nobody drops out or moves in, nobody will recognize that this is happening. And this is the case in many, many circumstances in your national or organizational tenders. Now, we tried to find out. So we got assistance from a number of big tenderers, and we were allowed to analyze their tenders. And the first question they asked is, okay, if we remove a bid, so if we go from 3 bidders to 2 bidders, so somebody drops out, which occasionally happens because he didn't submit all of his papers, work, etc. If somebody drops out, well, it's not too bad. That can only happen if somebody drops out and then change of winner. Only in 3% in practice, the practice that we did, we could do in simulations, we could 7%. But the other way around, if we start with 2 and then somebody is considering to participate or not, then we can find a somebody to participate that changes the winner in 30% of the cases. So all organizations that use this rule, I can tell you, academically sound research, 30% of the cases somebody else would have won if a non-competing supplier would have participated. So basically you're entering into a kind of tombola when you use this kind of scoring mechanism. So never do that again. I'm trying to eradicate this practice in all of the Dutch government agencies, and I'm halfway. But a number of, like UN, Belgian government, it's mandatory even to use these procedures. And I applaud the Portuguese government for eradicating this by law. Okay. Second thing about this particular formula, did you notice this is a hyperbolic formula? You probably wouldn't. Meaning that this is not a straight line. It's like this. Because the price is in the denominator. Yeah? So it's like this. What does it mean that the formula is like this? To me as a mathematician it's easy, but you should realize this is the case. This means that if the best price gets the maximum score, that somebody with a little bit higher price immediately loses quite a lot of points. Yeah? Go a little bit to the right on this figure here, and you lose a lot of points. Whereas here, you go a little bit to the right, doesn't really matter in the number of points. This is a recipe for giving additional advantage to the best price. So the lowest price bid likes this formula, which may be your intention, it may not be your intention. To me, it usually seems this is not your intention. Yeah? And final example to give you some insight into how these simple calculations can affect transparency in meat procedures quite a lot is the minimum quality level. Frequently you see cases in which we say, okay, I give price some weight, I give quality some weight, and we require a minimum quality level. This example 7. Now, the acceptable quality scores are between 7 and 10. So the possibility to make a difference on quality is 3 score points. Even if we give quality 60% weight, the maximum difference in the final score is 18 points. 3 times 60% of 100. Price scores range from 0 to 100. 40% gives 40 points. So we say price is less important than quality, and we add a minimum threshold for quality. So we give lots and lots and lots of emphasis on quality, but what do we achieve? Price is 40% in the final decision, and quality is only 80%. How does this come about? Well, simple situation. I can show that graphically. Here we have the quality scores from 0 to 10. You could score 60 points with quality. So the line is this, but this yellow area is unacceptable. So we remain with this blue line. What you should do if you do a minimum quality level of, in this case, 7, is then score your quality on this red line. And very, very few people do. They do not use this transformation after the minimum quality level. Which again means that if you work with the blue line only, you give additional emphasis to price. This is not completely forbidden, but it's not transparent. It is, well, usually you achieve something else than that you wanted by putting a lot of emphasis on quality. So I gave you a few examples, and the main background is that it seems like nitty-gritty. It seems like everyday detail. It seems like very clerical work in the procurement department. But actually, making the scoring rules is the most strategic element in the award decision in a tender. And there's a lot of hidden things in these award mechanisms. And I showed you just a few. There are many, many more in there. And if you want to know more, just write me an email. Thank you very much.
First, full transparency of all relevant quantitative aspects of criteria, measuring, and so on is must. If we have partly transparent criteria, measuring, scoring, it is precondition for possible manipulation, for losing fair competition, and we are just hiding what is really behind the curtain. And the second, as a lawyer, I was good in mathematics, that is why I went to law. Without interdisciplinary approach, lawyers cannot understand what is behind, again, the curtain without those aspects. So now, thank you for your wonderful presentations. Now it is the time for questions and answers. Please.
I'm Yung Zhao again, and thank you for Professor Jane, for your interesting topic. As an economic professor, I'm also very interested in the formulas and scoring issues. But as I know, China and the U.S. is in the opposite. In China, every buyer has to have very explicit formula for scoring and publish in the bidding document. We has to. In U.S. Competitive negotiation, they have three options. Option one, price is more important than quality. Option two, quality more important, and option three, similar. And they gave very big discretion to the contracting officer. So very, very different. But for us, we saw the disadvantage of our system. One is very clear, transparent formula and scoring. It will also lead to the bidders to manipulate or to collusion. Option one. That's disadvantage one. The second, most buyers could not be that rational. As I taught in my class, if a girl has want to select boyfriend, they have many criteria. One is height, one is the salary, and can she decide in the bidding documents 1 inch is more important or $1 million more important before met the boys? The girl, most buyers could not be that rational, and even the human beings could not be that rational in some cases. So transparent and very clear scoring formula also has disadvantages. That's my observation. Thank you.
Yeah, as a comment, all of this knowledge is not developed in procurement. There's a field of mathematics called multi-criteria decision making, which has its own society, its own journals. They have hundreds of methods. One of my PhD students assembled something like 350 out of them, and I probably know 25 by heart, but all the others I have to find out myself. They use these methodologies also to address other questions than just procurement and award decisions, like anything including your partner choice, but also where to put a nuclear reactor, where to put a waste dump, how to invest my money, etc. There's millions of multi-criteria decision problems. And yes, you're quite right, and that's what I mentioned on one of the slides as well. The main job of a purchasing person is to find out these scoring rules, and it's completely difficult. It is really very difficult. So I agree with him.
Lesson third that I learned is, of course, it is not possible to measure everything, but it is helpful, and it is connected also with the discretion. So on one side, you need someone who is accountable, who should take care about different aspects. But if we are using quantitative aspects, then, as you mentioned, it should not be only partly transparent, but it should be completely transparent.
One of the best examples I've ever seen is a system in which, suppose you are buying furniture, like office chairs or something like that, and then people could, or suppliers could react and say, yes, I want to bid, and then they got a password for a website. And then they went to the website individually, so it's not an auction where they bid against each other, individually, and they had to fill in what's the price, 200 euros, what's the delivery time, 6 weeks, how much does the seat go up and down, 6 centimeters, how much do the armrests go up and down and sideways, etc. They filled it in, and then at the end they saw, this way you have 534 points out of the 1,000. And then they thought, well, maybe I will not win with that. So let's change. Let's work in overtime, which is of course more expensive. So instead of 200 euros, it was 250. But instead of 6 weeks delivery time, it was 2 weeks. They filled it in, find out, hey, now it goes up to 587. These armrests, they're very expensive. Let's take them out, see what happens. So as a supplier, they were optimizing their own bid. And that's exactly what you want to have, provided, of course, what this gentleman remarked, provided your choice of score graphs or scoring mechanism is the right one. So, and this only works, our chairman pointed that out, this only works if all of your criteria are quantitatively there. So if you ask for a plan of approach, then it doesn't work.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Just a few words. The first one, obviously, that anyone who says something bad about the EBRD tender is obviously not invited to the next conference. But in your case, you are always invited. No, point is that I think this is an excellent example of something that we were talking about in the class just a month ago, the law of unintended consequences, which is also called Cobra effect, exactly like that. But what I wanted to say, two things. I mean, the first thing, these are excellent examples, but they're also very simple examples. Yeah? And point being that we invited to EBRD, we invited 2 different purchasing or procurement authorities in the UK, one very high up and one out from London, to explain how they did the evaluation of, for instance, a new underground station. The complexity of that evaluation methodology was unbelievable, totally incomprehensible for anyone, except obviously for those who were evaluating. It was very transparent in the sense that everything was out there, but you could get to any result you wanted in the evaluation. So it was a good example of the dangers with this kind of evaluation. And I would like to add in that context, that I think it's a shame that the lowest price only, so to speak, evaluation methodology, in my opinion, has a bad reputation because it's not properly used. I mean, there is no such thing as going for price only. Price is always the last thing that you look at. The first thing you look at is quality. Does it deliver what I want it to deliver? And only if it delivers what I want it to deliver, I look at the price. And that goes for different methodologies, such as life cycle costing, etc. It's built in. And that goes back to the thing that we try to preach, which is very much back to what you have been showing, that procurement is an art. It's not a science. You need to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve in order to be able to get a delivery of what you want to have delivered. Very important. Understanding from the beginning. A little statement.
Yes, would you like to?
I agree.
Yeah, that is crucial. This needs analysis, exactly what you need, and that is what you have to provide in criteria. Gustavo, please.
Thank you, Jan, for this. If procurement is not a science, to take Jack's words, scoring rules is as much as close as it gets to science, however. There's a lot of knowledge out there. We teach the things that Jan said in the master. One thing I really want Jan to be very clear, because he says one thing when he reads the slide, he wrote the thing differently in the slides. He writes in the slides, weights are worthless. He says in front of us something that which I agree much more, is that weights are worthless without scoring rules. Then one should be even more precise and says without certain types of scoring rules. For example, I share 100% the view that relative scoring is damnation for procurement. There's a science of that. And by the way, there's plenty of evidence that relative scoring rules increase, among the other things that Jan already mentioned, collusion risks, first of all. I would like to also clarify that we are risking something when we say that all these things that we are debating now have necessarily to do with corruption, which is not what Jan said. But it should be very clear, which I think is what Jan said, that it has to do either with corruption or with incompetence, and not to be forgotten. I should also remind everybody that the ideal scoring rule is the linear scoring rule for many reasons, but that linear scoring rules do not eliminate the possibility of corruption through points on quality. One thing I also wanted to say is that I think that one message that I got from Jan's, which was not in my head so clearly before, is that there is a huge risk from regulating this topic and from making statements like this must be mandatory. I give an example of the Italian case. A senator has just decided 2 years ago that in Italy, meat tenders, and this has been re-put again, it had been removed and it's been put again, meat tenders have to be at most with 30% price and as little as 70% quality. Now, you know what is happening right now in all the public procurement organizations that, whether for the right reason or the wrong reason, as Jack says, want to do instead only price? It's very easy. They put in the 70% quality, something that they already know that all the suppliers will reach. They all get 70 points, and then they do the tender on the 30%, which becomes an only price tender. So my final point is, it seems to me that in a sense, professionalization is not enough, because these things are out there. They're taught in Holland, they're taught in Italy. And so I think that there's the couple of solutions I wanted to hear from Jan is not making it mandatory, really fighting a battle for non-mandatory, and just keeping on sharing best practices from morning to night. Otherwise, these are big mistakes, the ones you talked about, not small. And they keep on being repeated and they keep on being legislated. And so we need to find a way out of this. It's been going on for quite a while. And I wanted to hear your opinion on this.
Okay. The question is whether we resolve the issue by professionalism or by rule of law. And I would like a situation if everybody in purchasing were as professional as not to use the wrong methods. Unfortunately, this is not the case. This is not the case in many countries. I don't like the idea of prescribing in law how we should do it. So I prefer the Portuguese approach and saying this particularly nasty and bad situation may not be used. So instead of prescribing how to do it, sort of forcing people into a more professional way, which, I mean, you know you can't do this, so you have to find something else. That's better than saying everybody has to follow this and this and this and this rule.
Different situations ask for different tools. And what you mentioned, that research of the market can show that you have something which is standardized. Then it is not necessary to spend, because it is also spending of time and energy on one side. But in some cases, and you have innovative public procurement, there is something that even don't exist. So there are different, and I agree that it should not be prescribed strictly. But on the other hand, if you have some let's say, what is the mission of the public procurement and those goals, then some instruments will show that they are appropriate more or less. Please.
I'm sorry, I'm not advertiser of IFIs, as one colleague said, but there are two things. Depending what result the agency wants to achieve, for me, the IFI's methodology is the best practice. First, there are several tools depending on what you want to achieve, and not necessarily to use the quality cost-based selection criteria, let's say. But if for you is most important is a cost, there is the other formula, another tool to, like least cost selection method to apply. If you want the quality, there is a quality cost-based selection. So whatever you need, you apply this. And sometimes for me, it's no need to invent the wheel from the zero. And many talented people have been working on these procurement methodologies and tools. And it's quite useful. And of course, if somebody wants to play, or some corrupted people, they find the way for play with scoring always. But the IFI procurement rules describes very well scoring methodology, how to post, which method to apply in which situation.
Scoring methodology, meet criteria. You, Jan, said some different approaches, showing which possible combination is mathematically more or less correct. And then your presentation was expressing your opinion, meaning that it's kind of a theoretical approach. But then we have a situation which is not such an abstract and such a theoretical one. We have in legal protection certain and very concrete challenges of the scoring methods, of the usage of the meet criteria, and we have certain case law. It's not very rich case law, and in my country we have very shy people who try to challenge scoring criteria with not much arguments, with much less arguments that you give to us, which is econometric proof of scoring criteria. But we have in case law, we have these things more or less successfully challenged. So there is something which is certain. I mean, according to your presentation, it's up to contracting authority to choose whatever, and who is to challenge that? But in each and every procurement, there are interested parties who try to challenge, and who is to check up what is the correct or not, because contracting authority is highly autonomous in selecting, even though they are using public money. Even though they might be assessed as not very responsible. So I just want to add this.
Well, I try to do.
Or maybe a question. Have you do you know in your country, is there any cases? Maybe you were involved as an expert witness. Where the scoring system or usage of meet criteria was challenged. And what was the result?
I try to do two things. First of all, as Gustavo indicated, there's a lot of things happening without people knowing. They apply a formula and then things happen behind the curtains, as you said, that they don't know. And usually it's price preference, unintentional price preferences that are there. Second, the second thing is that by giving you very, very simple examples, I try to convince the legal people in the audience that mathematics in terms of procurement is not so difficult that you could not understand and get to know and get acquainted with yourself.
and that mathematics is really helpful in understanding what's happening behind the curtains. Now, your follow-up question on challenges of awarding procedures. Yes, there have been some award procedures outlawed in case law in the Netherlands because of mathematical arguments. Yeah. So, yeah, expert witnesses is part of my job.
Yes, maybe I will also answer your question. I'm coming from Poland, and we have got a lot of cases of remedies in our audit chamber, which is a special audit chamber for public procurement, which is established only for hearing the cases on public procurement law, about 2,500 per year. And of course, most of them refer to the qualification criteria of the providers, but there is a big number of those which refer to the award criteria. So it depends, case by case. It depends on the particular case, what is answered in the remedy system. The second stage, it is the claim to the civil court, so that numbers are even higher. So it depends on the bidder and the knowledge and the legal support, what they try to prove. But they let's say discuss with the discretionary power of the contracting authority. And what I would like also to stress, it is very important just to allow in each member state the good practice example platform, and to exchange good practices among the member states of the European Union, but not only, the worldwide. What I sometimes use, these are also social media mentioned by our colleague Alexander, but on the level of LinkedIn. And it was a surprise for me how eager the professionals are just to share the good example practices. Of course, you have to be careful, yes, whatever they are good. But sometimes there are really very good practices. Some of them are gathered together by the Public Procurement Office. Some of them are gathered together in the framework of right research centers. Some of them are subject of the International Horizon 2020 project. But in fact, it's the truth that we do not have got one common platform of the good practices example, which just gathers together not only lawyers, but economists, the professionals from varied areas. It would help. Also in the reference to the promotion, I would say, the life cycle costing methodology.
I just would like to add what Ms. Gorczynska just said. Actually, I think also this discussion sometimes astonishes me. It reminds me good old Soviet days when you're coming to the canteen and you have choice of A or B. Why not C? You know, all discussion is about waiting and waiting. It's relative. It's all the figures we're talking about, they're very relative. But why not we refer to absolute measurement, universal measurement of value, money? Simply monetary, taking life cycle costing with all the adjustment. And I have to say we invest in very complex projects involving technology, design, build, concept. And our clients doing these NPV calculations, IRR calculations, and decide on that who is going to be awarded contract to. And quality is reflected in life cycle cost. If you have bad quality car, you invest in repair and changing the spares, maintenance more if you have high quality car. Actually, we had industry consultations, and these consultations suggest that in any sector of economics, people are very happy to offer a solution that provide sustainable in economic terms and monetary terms for the purchaser. So when we measure GDP, we don't say what was the weight. We're just saying so many millions or billions of euro or dollars. That's what we compare. And it also leads to the discussion of what is the best methodology. We always look from the platform of public purchaser or authority and suggest wording that to be challenged. Why not to talk about dialogue? Invite private sector to contribute to the discussion. Why purchaser decide, even if it goes to these relative factors, why purchaser is a party to decide? Why they don't listen to the market? And market, as its invisible hand, will even it out. It will make most fair, even in least objective and most common in EU, principle which called most economically advantageous tender, which has nothing to do with economics. And it's a very unfortunate choice of title for the criteria. The most relatively uneconomic method of evaluation called merit principle, unfortunately, or at least found the implementation in least objective way. So suggestion is just to have it more objective and involve other party, receiving parties, the suppliers, contractors, consultant, to help to find the most balanced solution. Thank you.
When I mentioned that the EBRD project showed that only when we are using price, especially if it is only in the moment when you are selecting, not using life cycle cost criteria. So if you just take into account what is the price of certain service or goods and so in that moment, without taking into account all those problems and it can be measured. And that is the problem. We are just taking one moment. And second, as you said, for example, very important is this conversation between contracting authorities and private sector, because also both sides can better understand each other, and this is helping also to market research and many other things. So we are usually consider them as the opposite, but no, raising the awareness about also those issues and everything else can help in better, in more transparency and better quality for less price. Gustavo, please.
In answer to Evgeny, the big advantage of linear scoring rules is that first, you put monetary value to a point. So you put the monetary value with that formula, and it's the only formula that allows you that. Second of all, linear scoring rules, well used, not randomly used, allow the public procurer to express his preferences, and as Jan said, this is another reason why they should be published, tell the market what they want. Yes, in a sense, you could argue that sometimes public procurers do not know exactly what they want, and then that's not what I'm referring to. But most of the times, when you go to a shop, you sort of know what you want. And it's important that you use scoring rules that allow you to do that. And linear scoring rules do that. So some of the points that were raised by Evgeny are answered by certain types of specific scoring rules once they are studied well. There are experts like Jan and others that do that all day long and would be fantastic consultants for public procurement to put monetary value and put preferences on that, which you cannot do with relative scoring rules, for example, as Jan very well showed.
Right, fascinating. Thank you very much for two super interesting, thought-provoking presentations that I'm sure we will continue discussing during dinner and tomorrow and so on and so forth. Now, because all things have two sides, all coins have two sides, I was wondering whether there could be a positive in the sort of problematic, prima facie problematic issue of not revealing the scoring system, even though you have, or rather not accompanying the revelation of the scoring system with the revelation of the weighting. The relative weighting that the contracting authority puts on the various tenders. Now, I'm linking to the conversation that and the question that Luca asked earlier on about collusion. Now, there is in the private sector one way of from the buyer to sort of nudge and sort of try to check whether there is collusion in the market is to award the contracts to a bidder that did not put forward the lowest price or relatively the lower price. And invariably, according to evidence, this is a nice way to sort of shake the cartel and then make the cartel lists looking at each other saying, hang on a minute, I was supposed to win this one, right? Because I gave so there is something wrong. And then they start running to the leniency program. The problem in principle that public purchases have is precisely that they cannot use this tool, right? And normally they should award the contract to the more economically most advantageous or the better price. I was just wondering, thinking out loud, whether in some cases not revealing the scoring and awarding the contract to the 18,000, right, per unit price would be a good tool to use to destabilize an alleged or suspected cartel in a given market. And in other words, allow public contractors to lawfully, right, without violating procurement rules, use this tool that is freely available for the private procurement buyers.
You're asking whether not revealing the scoring rules would be of assistance in breaking up cartels. Yeah? I don't know of any. I don't know of any of such cases. I mean, for a cartel to work properly, you have to keep others out. Yeah, to people that are not part of the cartel. And just by opening up your scoring rules, other prospective buyers can find out whether they would have a good chance or not. So they may be able to participate in the thing. If all of the bidders are part of a cartel, I don't think that any scoring rule or anything else would prevent them from determining who wins this time. So I don't think that non-revealing would be a solution to anything.
Answering your question a little bit, are you meaning just the front-end agreements and just the cartels, lowering the prices or increasing the prices? Because what I observe in some countries, with the access to some external financing and with the big demand on particular goods or, for example, just construction works, there are collusive agreements which are increasing the prices on the market. Yes? Yes, and it's the problem of the cartels, yes, and I don't know whatever just the scoring will help in that way, because there are just fraudulent agreements between the entrepreneurs, which are simply fixing prices on the particular level, and it's very difficult to detect them, even there are just special authorities for the protection of environment. Yes, maybe later.
Yeah, of course.
Annalisa doesn't want me. Annalisa wants to go home.
No, we have time till,
But
you mentioned, till 9 we are here.
okay, let's say that we have three options. We have the Iris option, okay, mysterious. Let's not publish it. And then we have two more options. One is relative scoring. One is linear scoring. Okay, I would prefer Iris option to relative scoring, because if the cartel likelihood is high, it's a good way to fight it. But I would prefer linear scoring to Iris option to fight the cartels. So overall.
That hiding the scoring rules would help if you make another mistake. So if you make two mistakes on top of each other, then they might eliminate each other. Yeah? Okay. Here we go. And that's exactly what Gustavo also said. Here we have this example. So this is relative scoring. This is something you should not do. But you can, so this is a mistake. Yeah? And now if you add on another mistake, not revealing the scores, then they would not see the position of C. So for example, if A and B compete, B will win. So for A, it would be very advantageous if C would participate. So A might pay C to participate. Put in a very poor bid, low quality, etc. But if you hide the scores, then even A could not see what's happening. Just the general mechanism, but not how low C should score. So this is making two mistakes sort of eliminate each other.
Sorry, Annalisa. Just one last thing. I think the other example is also very poignant in the sense that what was picked was the price and delivery time. If delivery time is of that importance to you that you're putting a score on that, why don't you just say, I need the car in 10 weeks' time? Punto. That's it. Why do I need to evaluate that?
I did that with all the other quality issues, so
exactly.
I wanted to leave one out.
I'm just taking that as an example, obviously, but at the end of the day, if you then have a window, 10 to 16 weeks, you put a value on that, because it means something to you, yeah? Then you have the same result, and more transparent, in my opinion. Yeah, no, not price only. You do the quality first, and then you do the evaluation, which includes, as a last point, the price. It's not price only. That's my point.
There are hundreds of evaluation methods, and converting everything to money is one of them.
Just to keep analysis for longer, actually. Just you're discussing about collusion, but no one mentions corruption. If you don't publish, this is the way to corruption, more than any collusion, which is even worse than collusion.
Away. Take it out.
Yes, okay, it is necessary to fix some criteria, and it is not necessary to measure them because they are what you need.
This is the most important topic of them all. We need another conference just for this.
Yeah. Okay, so
Description of the subject of the contracts.
having in
Welcome to Sweden. I will invite everyone to
having in mind all criteria, I think that we did it, and we deserve dinner.